Welcome to Season 2 of Under the Sisterhood. Over the 31 days of March, we are celebrating 31 Women's March of Voices during Women's History Month. We will have intimate conversations that will uncover each woman's superpower and find out how they use these superpowers to help other women. That's 31 days honoring 31 women and their superpowers. This is a podcast to celebrate women and all that they do in our world. I'm Elizabeth Elfenbein. Let's get under the hood. Today, I'm so excited to be celebrating Kathalynn Turner Davis. Kathalynn is a mother, grandmother, friend, life coach, psychotherapist, certified Sedona Method coach, high performance specialist, and workshop leader, as well as an actress and the author of Kiss Me Swami, The Spiritual Education of a Beauty Queen. Kathalynn has studied both Eastern and Western philosophies and teachings. She has traveled the globe to meet with many of the world-renowned teachers, swamis, and avatars. In addition to her long psychotherapist and coaching practice, she has a body of work in film, television, and theater. I am so delighted to have you here with me today, Kathalynn.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
This is just such an important month. This is Women's History Month, and it's all about celebrating amazing women from around the world. So I couldn't be more delighted to have you here with me today. You have a storied career. I read your book, Kiss Me Swami.
Oh,
I met you and I read the book and I was like, I need to know more. So thank you for joining us today. So why don't we get going?
all right.
So the first question is just the biggest question, and it's really about having a conversation around your story. So if you could share with everyone around the world your story.
You want me to share my story? Wow, it's a long story. I'm not a young girl here. No.
That's perfect. We have time.
Well, I was a girl from Maryland, and I twirled a baton. A lot of people did back in that day, and I was very competitive with that. And so one day, I was this chubby little unattractive kid, and I was on my way to the kitchen. I say in the book to get a snack, which my chubby little self didn't need, stepping over my father, who used to lay on the floor and watch television. And he stopped me. He said, "Sit down. I want you to watch this with me." And it was Miss America pageant. So I watched Marianne Mobley, I think it was 57, do a victory lap down the runway to there she is, Miss America. And my dad looked at me and he said, "You can do that one day. You'll be that." And I said, "You can't, no, I'm ugly, I'm terrible." And he goes, no, drink milk and you'll grow real tall and you can take that pageant." That changed my life, that moment, getting that approval from my dad and all of that. So I got busy, dance classes and, that and lost the weight kind of easily because it wasn't much weight. It was just getting in shape for those pageants. Now, back in those days, it was, it was whole different energy, whole different vibe. You felt like you had to be perfect. You felt like you had to be thin. And then I went to Hollywood after that, which I'll talk about in a minute. And a lot of pressure on women back then. Thank God, a lot of it is off now. Not all, but some of it is off from the way it was back then. So I did compete. I was Miss Maryland teenager, Miss DC teenager, and I was Miss Southern Maryland. And I think the biggest disappointment in my life, I had won the swimsuit competition, God knows why. I mean, and I won the evening gown and the talent, but I lost the contest. And at that time, it was very, very disappointing to me. But sometimes the biggest disappointments that we have is the greatest thing that could ever happen to us. And that's what happened to me. If it hadn't been for losing that, I would have never gone to LA. My life never would have taken off the way it took off. And so, but anyway, on the Miss Teenage pageant, Palisades Park, New Jersey, I met a guy, and he was the singer on the show. And we were backstage, kind of outside backstage in Energy Day. And I was looking at him with all these girls around him. I didn't know who he was. He was just so damn cute, and then he started looking at me, and he said, I turned away. But before I knew it, he came up to me and he said, "Hi, I'm Brian. What's your name?" I told him my name. He said, "Well, I think you're gonna win. I think you're the prettiest girl here today. You're gonna win. But I lost.
But you met him.
But I met Brian. And, you know, I tell in the book that when I lost that, that evening, I felt like a tap on my shoulder. And I turned around and to see who was there. I know when he was there. And it felt like something was wrapped around me, telling me everything is going to be okay. So I was walking off, and then I noticed some guy standing at the mic, and he was singing "Sealed with a Kiss." So it's Brian Hyland. The book, and the name of the song was "Sealed with a Kiss," and the record skipped, and he's singing to skip, and then all of a sudden he stopped, and I thought, "Wow, does he handle this gracefully?" They just started over, and that was it. And then I was walking off, and I met him again. And he said, "I'm sorry, you know, I'm sorry. I don't know why you lost." It was very sweet. And then, you know, he didn't ask me for my phone number or anything. I thought, okay, you know, I'm going to see that guy again. 2 weeks later, I did. He sang at my high school, of all high schools, all over the, he sang at that one. And he drove me home that night again. He didn't ask me for my phone number. And, but I knew I'd marry him one day. So he walked me to my door, and then a little bit later, because of him actually, and I was invited to do a TV show called The Dating Game at the same time.
I remember the
Yeah, you
dating
remember
game.
the dating
Yeah, how
boy.
fun.
So I told my parents, you know, that was the reason. It was really Brian that I wanted to go out. And so I went to LA all by myself. Got on that big bird, first time I'd
How old
ever
were you
been on a
again?
plane.
How old were
I
you?
was almost 20. And I just assumed he was gonna, I had called him and he said he'd meet me at the airport. He didn't show up. And, you know, I talk about the last bag came off the conveyor back, no him. And, you know, back then you didn't have cell phones, you didn't have credit cards, you didn't have anything. I knew no one. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know LA at all, where to stay or anything. I just went on a blind assumption. Of course he's going to. And I think this part of my life was the most extraordinary. This moment where I went to a phone booth to call him, and some guy answered the phone. He happened to be the singer Del Shannon, who did that song "Run, Run, Run Away" and some of those songs. And I said, "Yeah, it's Brian there." He goes, No, he's not here." I said, "Well, my name is Kathalynn. He's supposed to meet me at the airport, you know." "Oh, I don't know. He mentioned some girls coming in tomorrow, but I don't know." Click.
Oh my God.
Wow, you know, this was insane. There was a knock at the door. You know, right there. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. You want to use the phone booth?" And this guy said, No, I overheard you. My name is Jack Keller. I wrote the song Gidget, and he wrote 1,000 other songs. And, you know, and he said, "Look, I know Brian very well, and I will get hold of Brian for you. But right now, it's getting late. And we're going to a surprise birthday party for Tony Orlando." Like, you know, and all his songs, "Halfway to Paradise" and "Tie a Yellow Ribbon" came out later. But anyway, so I thought, well, maybe that's better than spending the night at the airport alone. So I ended up at this party. I didn't drink. I did smoke at the time. I didn't do drugs or anything. So I'm sitting at this party, drinking black coffee after they offered me everything else, drinking my black coffee, and then singing "Happy Birthday" with the Monkees, the American Breed, you name the groups, to Tony Orlando from a girl in Maryland. And indeed, he got hold of Brian.
Was Brian at the party? I can't
No,
remember.
no.
Okay, he didn't show at the party. Okay.
No, he wasn't invited,
Mm.
but I was.
Mm.
Anyway, I don't want to just continue with that because I know there's so much other things to discuss besides my first Hollywood experience and all that stuff. But anyway, it didn't work out with Brian. And then I saw him at the London Palladium many years later, like 32 years later. And then 18 years later, we're married. So there was this whole kind of string there. It's a story that we're writing together now.
And it's so beautiful. I
Thank
mean, you have an amazing story. So that's a nice little, I feel like that's a nice little window into your world, which is that connective, that relationship that sort of happened throughout the journey of your life.
Mhm.
when I read Kiss Me, Swami, just following your journey through life, which of course tells the story from a young age as to where you are now. I mean, you've been through so many different sort of inflection points that have moved you and directed you. And so it would be great to hear some of, yes, you're married to Brian now, and he's a wonderful part of your story, but you've done so much. So yeah, no, you're amazing. And so it would be great to hear some more of like the different chapters, of your life in between meeting Brian, Hollywood, coming to New York and everything. It would be great to hear about that.
Sure. Well, what happened to me after Brian was, I remember looking out the window at Sunset Boulevard, and thinking, wow, the only thing I ever knew about that was that movie with Gloria Swanson. What was it called? I can't remember the movie right now, but anyway, and I'm thinking, I'm in Hollywood. This is where dreams are made. I'm staying. And so, from there, I ended up going to a recording session with another recording artist that was very nice, and ended up, getting an apartment, a car. And indeed, I got called to do the dating game. Now, what was interesting with the dating game, and I talk about it in the book because other women, I'm sure, experienced similar thing, that I went on the interview. I walked in this room, never interviewing for anything like that before, and there were all these girls more peppy. I thought they were so peppy they were going to levitate. I mean, everybody's all, and everybody was looking for anything but love, I think there. And the guys were leaning against the wall in their James Dean poses, and it was also surreal to me. And I finally got called in the room, and I looked, and behind the interview guy was a picture of Miss USA, this beautiful girl. And of course, I just lost the passion. And I was just and I was like, oh man, this is following me around. This whole, I wanted to get rid of that whole thing. I actually threw every trophy away and threw all that stuff away when I ended up leaving LA. But I was like really upset over it. But somehow I must have did all right in the interview. I got the show.
Well, it's interesting. It might have motivated you. It might have been that little thing that was like, sort of lit you up, and made you sort of more inspired in that moment to convey your passion for whatever it was you had to, whatever questions or, however they asked you. So it might have, even though it was one of those things that was like bringing back a memory, it also could have been that sort of like hope,
Absolutely, it could have. But for me in that moment, it kind of drove me to, oh God, I'm awful. My body's awful. I'm not a winner. All of those things that come up, because I talk about in the book, even though my life seemed to unfold as magical, and many things did, I was very, very blessed. But I also worked very hard. And I also had this inner knowing of what I kind of had, maybe an intuitive knowing is where I stopped and where, I could go. And that led me well in life to leave LA when I did leave it, to go to New York, and to take the different steps that I took. But anyway, I did end up doing that dating game show. And when I walked out, again, you never know what's on your path. Some guy stopped me, I didn't know who he was. I never saw him again, and said, you'd make a cute little Corey. Did you ever see the movie Barefoot in the Park? They're casting a TV series. And I go, oh man, that Jane Fonda, but I'm not Jane Fonda. And he said, well, it's a series. Would you like to have an interview? Call this number tomorrow. So I called the guy. He set up an interview at Paramount Studios with Gary Marshall and Jerry Belson. And I had never interviewed for anything. So I went over to Paramount Studios. I talked about what it was like to go in those gates, like Paramount, and then all these stars are walking around the lot, and it was just amazing. I, pull up my little car and go in. They hand me the signs, which are called the signs. I didn't know what they were, and they said, "Do you have a headshot?" And I go, well, what's that? I didn't know what a headshot was. I mean, that's how naive, totally naive I was. But I went in, and the script called for somebody yelling. They were having an argument. I thought, well, I can yell. I used to watch my parents yell at each other. I can yell good. So I just picked up the script and started. Yeah.
That's-
But the guy that interviewed me was Jerry Belson, who he was the coolest dude in the world. He was so cool. I mean, Jerry had, this afro hair and he had his glasses and he had his love beads on him. He was like the ultimate hippy dippy. And I thought, well, the other guy is not here. But after I did the scene, a head popped up from the couch and went, "That was good." "Oh, where'd you study?" And I said, "High school, and he went, "The kid's a natural." The kid's a natural. And they started laughing. But they told me that they weren't doing the series, that they were doing they were doing it, but it was doing it with an all-black cast. So they'd like me to guest star on it. And then they said that they were doing a movie. And the movie was with Jacqueline Bisset, Jim Brown, and Joseph Cotton. It was a big movie, and there was a part they'd like me to test for. And I did. The role.
That's a nice
And
story.
it was like within 3 months of being in LA. So I was off, and I'd done the dating game. I did that. I did Love American Style, which they went into. So, I got lucky off the bat there.
But I want to interject, sorry, I need to interrupt for a second. And I think the point is some of it's luck, but all of that work you did to be able to show up and walk that pageant runway and stuff and do all those tricks and all those things isn't luck. Excuse me, it's hard work, it's perseverance, and it's having that, even if it's fake it till you make it, confidence is what you did. And you were able to actually bring that with you to LA and show up. And so even though you might have those moments afterwards, it was like, I'm not good enough, I'm not like them, what have you. Unfortunately, when you put yourself in a position where you're in a competition, you're always comparing yourself to the people you're
Always.
competing with.
Always.
And which can be very harmful to the mental self, if you will, to the self. And so and of course, that was very much of the time. That was in the 60s. I mean, that was sort of the name of the game out in Hollywood. I'm not saying it's not today, but certainly back then. What I'm really intrigued with is that journey, because, the whole kiss me swami, going all that from Hollywood, which is all this external view and lens on you, and even the pageantry to the spiritual things. I'd love to hear your journey as it relates to that.
How it relates to
Yeah, and
that,
I'd like to, and I know that you're more on Hollywood, but it would be great to understand
no.
the connection, because
Sure.
to me, I was so taken aback by your story of going, that's all this external stuff. And when you start looking and traveling the world, you're doing this.
So actually, it's relevant in the sense to Hollywood because I felt like a phone. I felt like, well, this stuff is easy, what I was doing. And I did an acting class that I really didn't like. It was a lot of Hollywood people, and it just seemed like I wasn't happy with it. And someone told me about another class. So what really got me on a journey was I went into the class, and a lot of the really great New York actors were there. I mean, like really, really great people. And the work was extraordinary. And it made me see what I didn't know, that I wasn't really trained, and that I wanted to do that. I wanted to be that. I wanted to do the kind of work that they did. And they would talk about New York and the subways and their experience, and the great teachers of theater were here. Stella Adler, for me, being the greatest. Lee Strasberg, they didn't like each other much. And then Stanford Meisner. I mean, they were the great ones. And then there was Uta Hagen and a few others, but Stella, Lee, and Sandy Meisner, they were the greatest. And I wanted to go to New York. And so after 3 years, almost to the day, I let the whole career go. I just dropped it all and went to New York. Now, where it's relevant with the spiritual journey is that I was a tightly wound person. Being this girl in pageants, being this girl that had to be perfect, had to do all of that. I didn't do drugs. I wouldn't have a touch of alcohol. I had to feel in control. But with that comes something you can't get in touch with. You lose a lot of your vulnerability. You lose your ability to really open. And I knew it. And I knew in order to be a good actor, I had to unravel myself.
How old were you at
Had
this
to make
point?
that
Because
happen.
that's really profound that you would have gotten that coming out of
20
Hollywood.
I was 22.
I mean, to understand that at 22, in particular, without all the stuff behind it, like that's a real pivotal moment, wouldn't you say?
I think so, because I knew what I wasn't and what I had to do.
Mm.
Because doing the parts out in LA, now I go, God, I was so lucky and I would love, that was great. And I should not have poo-pooed it at all. I had a natural ability to do comedy. I remember after the Grasshopper, they had a party and Jacqueline, somebody said, wasn't she wonderful in this movie? And Jackie said, yes, she's great at comedy. And I remember it was a moment when I thought I was going to die. Comedy, I'm going to be comic. I didn't like that. And anyway, Jackie said is wonderful. She tried to fix me up with her brother once in New York. But she's a doll, but she meant it complimentary, but I took it the wrong way. But I long to be like those actors. But I had a lot of work to do on myself. I knew I had a lot of work to do on myself. So when I was in Stella Adler's acting class, these people were talking about this thing they called back then, and how, they were opened up and they got all these realizations. I signed up immediately.
Oh, est.
Oh, yeah, I did
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But
I had a
I
professor
also-
in college, art school, who tried to get me into est, but go on.
But it was all kinds of things started to evolve. But the first thing that happened to me was before I left LA, I went to the psychic, and the psychic told me all this stuff. You're gonna have signs to leave, and every one of them happened. And you're gonna see that you're gonna leave, and one thing happened after another. And she told me to pick up a book, and the book is called The Power of Constructive Thinking by Emmett Fox. So I went and bought the book, but I didn't open it. So I went to New York, and one night, I'm sitting in this little room. I rented a room on 57th Street at this beautiful building called the Park Vendome in someone's apartment. She was renting rooms, but it took a month before it was ready till someone else moved out. So I lived at this hotel, this dumpy little hotel that happened to be the best place I could have ever lived at, because right next door was Luigi's dance studio, which I was a dancer, so that was perfect for me. So I got up in the morning, put my leotards on, had my black coffee with my macaroon, and danced all day. But when I started doing TV commercials. So I had an agent already signed when I went out, from LA. They wanted to sign me. Coincidence. It was a coincidence that they were moving to New York. It just all kind of unfolded so beautifully.
How lucky.
So
You're right.
it was
is a
as
little
if
bit of luck.
spirit was guiding this whole thing to get me to New York. But I opened the book one night in New York when I first got there. I had nothing to do, and I thought, let me read this book. Book changed my entire life.
So tell us about that. That's interesting.
Changed my entire life, and it put me mainly on that totally on the spiritual path, not mainly, but it did. The book was basically metaphysics, was basically the science of mind, or all of the New Thought movement. And it was really about, your thoughts and your feelings and what you're thinking and your concept of yourself. And all of that is what your world's going to be. And that you're not victim of what's on the outside. You're not victim of anyone else. It's all up to you. And I read that book all night. The next day I booked 2 commercials. Then the next day I booked 2 more. I mean, my entire whole outlet changed, and I hated commercials. But I said, I love commercials. I changed my whole mindset. So the head of the agency, Bill Cunningham, who was one of the greatest people I have ever known in this lifetime, privileged to have known Bill, that he said, I want to take that girl to lunch at PJ Clark's, which was a kind of cool little place. I got to meet her. She's booking like crazy. And I told him about this book. He said, what are you doing Sunday? So he took me to Lincoln Center, to Alice Tully Hall, to hear a guy by the name of Raymond Charles Parker speak. And I was done. This was my path. It was my path. And I signed up for classes. I bought the books, everything. And my entire life changed. And when I studied with Sal, I was able to have a method. I was able to have a way to start the inner opening, to begin it. And then from there,
beautiful.
I was introduced to some meditation. I was then, you're kind of on that path And I did everything. I mean, I climbed mountains, I jumped off cliffs, I walked around in circles saying my name used to be, telling everybody they're beautiful. And I go, you know, once you had to stand in the mirror and look at yourself and go, oh, I'm so beautiful. I did it once. Never again. Like, that one I didn't like. But I started on the path of the releasing work that I did. And then I got into that work. So I had two works, and that I would say today are the most powerful things I've ever done. Was the letting go work, the releasing work, which deals with the feeling, the wanting approval, or the wanting to control, or the wanting safety and security. The premise being 1 equals 10. So there's a distance between having and wanting. Like you can't stand and sit at the same time. So what was happening, I was saying, I want, instead of letting the energy of want go and simply knowing, simply having, simply being. So my real journey began with that work. I mean, it began, but the real deeper work. And I was able, through that letting go, through all of that work, kind of unlock myself and kind of get in touch with my feelings and my emotions and begin to be free.
So I have a question,
Yeah,
because
sure.
I'm sorry if I'm interjecting. I do have a question, and I'm just curious because, I mean, this is a pivotal moment. Being on stage in Hollywood is very, when you think about it, it's a very external facing thing. Doing the
Sure.
work on self to unlock self is a very internal thing. How, like, I mean, that's like dramatic. And when you think about where you are in life now, in terms of your age,
Yeah.
do you feel like you were at like the beginnings? You know, a lot of women, a lot of people are on these journeys now to unlock themselves. And I would say I've been on a sort of a spiritual journey, but were you at the kind of the forefront of it, do you think?
Well, I think the work yeah,
Do you know
this
what
was
I'm
the
saying?
beginning of that particular work, that particular methodology. That was the beginning of it, sort of. And I think ESSA just began in New York mainly, then it went to the West Coast, and actualizations and all of that kind of work. The New Thought movement was the late 1800s, and the great teachers were around in England and in LA, actually. LA started that with Ernest Holmes' work. But the work was some of it was really beginning. It was the new, what was self-realization. It was all of that moment when that started to explode and everyone was doing this kind of thing.
And do you feel like, just from a woman's perspective, like, do you feel there was anything, you know, sort of specific to being a woman in that, or just generic to, you know, non-gender specific? Like it was just this, because I'm just curious as it relates to,
Well, I think
you
at
know.
the same time in LA and everything, it was a sexual revolution where there was the pill, where there was things where women were freer sexually. So everything started to begin. The sexual revolution a little bit before got involved in that, but everything sort of happened. And I think more for women, actually, because women are more tightly wound most of the time. Women are the ones, you know, they're the womb of creation, right? And so I think women in general were there to do it. Not to say that in a lot of these teachings, there were a lot of men, but also a lot of creative people, in that. And so I think some of the seminars are geared towards men, like Tony Robbins. I think he's absolutely phenomenal, but he's, you know, a lot of business people did that to go to the next level of business and creating money. I never had money in mind. I never had any of it in mind. All I wanted to do was be a better actress. And in order to be a better actor, I needed to be able to be in touch with who I was. And when that camera hits you, or when you hit that stage, which I always preferred, you better be authentic, or the audience knows within 5 minutes. And I wanted to do that so badly that I would have jumped off 1,000 cliffs to, you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
you know,
to be your best self and to
experience,
show up,
to
to
show
be
up
able to
and
show up
and to do
authentically.
that.
No, I love that. I'm curious though, because it's interesting. That might have been the impetus for you to do it, meaning you wanted to be your best actor self,
Right.
and your best self within acting. But as you went on that journey, so, and you know, you started traveling, going to places like India. I mean, tell us about some of those experiences, because I would imagine that it then got deeper and deeper and deeper into, you know what I'm saying? And wasn't
Sure,
necessarily
sure.
as connected to wanting to be a best actress. It sort of sounds like it might have taken a life of its own.
Yeah, it started to take a life of its own. You're absolutely right. And then I let go of acting for quite a while. And it wasn't that anymore. It was a different thing. I wanted to show up for my children. You know, I had 4 children, which I talk about in the book. And I wanted to be a better mother. I wanted to be more present for them. And when you are, you know, stuck in the past, you're stuck in your own crap and you're not there. You're not there for someone. You're really not there. So I knew again that to show up for my children, to be able to move forward in anything that I did, that I had to keep evolving. Now, I will say this, a lot of people in some of the work, they were looking to be completely enlightened, that their goal was to be enlightened. That was never a goal. You know, when the goal with some of the work was freedom, to me, freedom was to be more alive, to be more loving, to be more kind, to be
I
able
love that.
to be
That's
more,
beautiful.
to even be more
That's such a
successful.
and it's so interesting. That's such a woman's sort of, and I mean that in the best sense of the word. We're nurturers, we have empathy, we're kind, we're all these, we have so much capacity. So it is like it's, you know, it's just interesting for you to say it that way, because I think it really it resonates with me. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
yeah, no, that totally makes sense. It's so interesting. And, you know, like when I read your book and just thinking about bringing you on to celebrate you during this month, what I just absolutely adored was not just it coming from your voice. Like I could see you throughout the story because it's your story, but I could experience it with you, your journey. And for me, just with the experience I've been on, is I've just watched you sort of come out of your, you know, it's interesting. You were out of your shell in a metaphoric way because you were a performer, you know, an entertainer, you know, a competitor, and you're on the stage, which is very, you know, again, back to the external, but coming out from an internal, like really getting to know yourself. And in my mind, where you are today in your 70s, like that, you are like so ahead of most women. I think that's very progressive, because I think that a lot, seriously. And so I was very intrigued by the book and by you because of that, because it just showed so much depth, to your point of like having to put that face on and be that thing. And maybe it was unlocking your career, your acting career, by going on that internal journey and making yourself vulnerable and becoming more authentic.
Well, here's the thing, you know, theater was different. Stella Adler was the greatest spiritual teacher I've ever had, because she was such a psychologist, but in a very spiritual way. And when you start to analyze characters from the greatest plays, like Ibsen's A Dollhouse, when you start to get to know Nora and what her struggles were, and when you start to get, you know, the play The Father, The Chariot, all the great plays that there were, from the greatest playwrights, in my opinion, in the world, Strindberg, Miss Julie, what went on in her, where she lost her soul actually to the sky. And you begin to understand the human condition, which I always thought was very important, to understand the human condition. And also then, you know, to understand what we're here for. Mainly, we're here to connect. I believe we're here to connect with the Creator. But in my journey, I had to understand the human condition first and understand what drove people. And that's where acting really came in. It really came in. And then once I started this journey, I wanted to understand people more in order to help them. So my undergraduate work was in world religions, because you have someone that is Islam, you know, and they're Muslim. You want to understand. You want to understand the religion. You want to know what is there, you know, what could make them tick in order to really help them. Because my work does not, it can work through across any religion. Letting go is letting go, to teach people how to let go, actually how to. Everybody says let go, but the actual way to allow that energy to leave and to show them how to do it. And also to direct their mind in what they want. Religion doesn't make any difference, but you want to understand people that you're working with. You know, whether you're from a Jewish background, whether you're from Catholic background, whatever. So I studied the world religions, Buddhism,
That's
Hinduism,
amazing.
all of it, so that when I work with someone, I go, what's your background? So I get a little bit of maybe the programming or the patterns that come with them. So
Interesting.
yeah, and so
Very interesting.
when I got when that was finished and I realized, now what do you want to do?
And where were you in your life? So you went to
Went
college,
back to
backtracking.
school.
How old were you when you went back?
I was like 49. Yeah.
I want to high five you.
Yeah.
You are
I
a
had
rock star. That's
finished
fantastic.
my undergraduate, then I went right to graduate school.
And tell
And-
us about that.
Well, I went to graduate school because I realized that I wanted to be legitimate in the world. I know this sounds crazy, but I
Mhm.
had, the licensed coach from NYU, the Sedona Method, I'm a reverend of the science mind if I want to do it. I'm a practitioner, all of that stuff, but people really love credentials. In order for me to use all of this stuff that really works, which is the other stuff, I wanted to get the letters behind my name. I wanted to just, do that in the world to get it for that. And it was amazing education to really understand sociology, to understand poverty, to understand
Mm,
people's struggles, to understand all of it, and having an MSW in social work,
that's
to do
amazing.
that and to really get, to see life, because I've seen it at the top, I've seen it in between, and to see where the real struggle is and why people struggle, and to help them know that they can create a different life at any moment regarding their circumstances. So I needed to, again, understand people better and fuller.
That's amazing. And I mean, I was really proud of my mom. She got her she left college to marry my father, I think at 21.
Right, yeah.
And she went back, and at 35, she was divorced with 3 little kids and went back to college at nighttime and got her degree at 35. So I was really proud of her for that. And she was a social worker, so it's interesting. But to hear you tell your story and just going back in your 49 and then in your
Yeah.
early 50s to do that, I mean, just, another reinvention of Kathalynn. I mean, it's just amazing.
It was
And,
crazy.
and I think it's crazy,
Yeah.
beautiful and amazing. And talk about just having confidence and conviction to be able to go out there and do it, but knowing what you needed to do to be able to do it and acknowledging that. It seems like you all through your life and your journey, I'm seeing the one thing that's connecting is a real sense of self-awareness, even if you're hard on yourself at moments,
Yeah, I think that, I did have an intuitive thing about myself. And, I think one of the things they said, what would you do? Tell your younger self not to be so hard on yourself. I think most people would say that. And, it's easy to say that now, but you are hard on yourself. You are expecting more of yourself than others are expecting of you, really. So, but I think that the journey, I always have said this, I'm not after, people said, I want to be a teacher of this, I want to do this. I needed to do life first because I needed to experience it. In other words, if I'm saying to you, well, you can do acting, you can do this, but I need to experience what it was like to do it, to have that, or what it's like to be this and that and the other. I wanted to come from my inner knowing, not from reading a book, not from any of that. So I had to put it to work for me, not just to go from learning to teaching, to make life,
to experience it.
to have life. And a lot of people, I believe very strongly that a career is enormously important. So you feel like you're doing something, but also mother is very important. And that's a career, but also on the spiritual journey. And on your career, you got to remember life. You got to have a life too.
I'm learning that. I'm in my
Yeah.
late 50s now.
Life
And
too.
I think between managing like just growing professionally and being in executive positions and just like tremendous amount of hours I put into it.
Amazing.
So, I
what
mean,
you do.
well, I mean, it's good and it's not so good because to your earlier point of, was I present enough for my children? But I think the point is, I'm only learning that now I'm an empty nester and my kids are my priority. I don't work the same way. I will never work the same way. I have to work very efficiently, very smart without what is it, the 10% of crap, take that off the table. Be self-care, take care of self so you can show up, be your best self for
you
yourself
go.
and for
There you
them.
go.
And so I've made that my focus. But to your
Yeah,
point, like when
yeah.
you're in it, you're experiencing working, mothering, and all of that, you aren't living life. You're just literally in this perpetual doing state that you don't have any time to be. And so now I have time to be and I can reflect.
Beautiful.
And
Yeah.
it's really interesting. It's really, I mean, that would be my biggest thing, would be to be more present. I mean, on the weekends, I did everything to try and make up for not being as present during the week. But your partner, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're responding to emails like obsessively. So you're not as present as you could have been. And so it's been a really interesting journey for me, but I can relate to what you're saying and the fact that mothering is important. The career for me, I was always very motivated by that. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for the most part. She did end up working, but I always wanted to be able to be independent. So I'm curious about that with you. I mean, it's so interesting because we're a slightly different generation and you were just so, I believe, ahead of your time in the way you operated. Very inspiring in that regard.
Well, thank you. I don't know. I mean, I always had a certain drive to do something. But when those babies were put in my arms, I knew that that was my priority and I didn't bring them in the world to neglect them. So I felt a great sense of responsibility with the children, but I still had a drive in me that having the children were not enough for me. So I still had to do something. So it's balance it can be difficult. And there are people that say to me, well, you've done it all, you've had it all. Well, not all at one time.
And also there's a price,
know,
right? There is a price. You give one thing. I mean, it is a juggling act, which is very hard to balance.
The one thing where you said it was work, for me, it was not work with them. To me, it was my own inner spiritual journey and my own work on myself that took me away from them more than a job. Or
Oh, you're saying, yes, it was work
it
for
was
me.
me
It was
that,
a job.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Supporting the
difference in that.
household and stuff,
Sure.
like, and feeling, back to your
There
comment,
you
the
go,
feeling is
yeah.
tremendous responsibility.
Yeah.
I brought my beautiful children into the world. I've got to give them a great life.
Yes.
So, and you know what? If I could go back, did they need to go to the best schools to have them
No.
travel the world?
No,
Have
I
all
know
these
that.
entitled
No,
things?
no.
Would they have been happier to have more time with me? So I can't go back, but I can go forward. And it's like interesting learning that we do. And I'm not going to beat myself up because you
of
can't
course not.
change it.
No, and I met
I-
one of your daughters and she's just doing fine. She's beautiful. She's absolutely beautiful and she's very
Thank you.
involved,
Yeah.
involved now, very successful and involved. So I think you did a lot right that, but I knew for myself that if I didn't keep doing, like I would go to workshops, like on Wednesday evening to release, or I would do a course on weekend and my mom would come up and I would do a 6-day course here and there. And of course I left the kids, but I knew it was very important because if I wasn't together, how was I going to be good for them?
Exactly.
And look, I was a mess, man. I got to tell you, I wasn't like this together girl. When I went to LA, I had so many insecurities you couldn't even imagine. I put on that front, this girl, but boy, underneath it was, oh my God, I'm not good enough. I don't have what it takes. No, this one would never want me, this and that and the other. My head was spinning with stuff, but underneath all of that stuff, there was just knowing that everything's going to be all right. Don't worry about it. It's all going to be all right. So you got a lot of things going. And I talk about it in the book that I think that a lot of women would like, or they'd appreciate it. They might the same way. We have programming. Some is great, some is in between, and some is not good. and the programming fights.
Mm.
So what I got to notice about me, I got that movie, right? I got this, but the big ones, the real big ones, no, I got so far. And that's because in me, there were the other stuff going on. We really don't have what it takes, Kathalynn. You really, and I know exactly where that came from.
Mm.
But once I was able to take a look at that stuff and go, well, you know what? Thank you very much. You might have protected me for a long time. I don't need you anymore. I'm going to let you go.
Mm. Great. That's,
And I think I
yeah.
can take over from here. And I think,
It's so interesting to even I'm not sure it's a metaphor because it's a real life experience of what our heads tell us, but I
Sure.
think this is
Yeah.
great to tell women around the world. Because your story, it's really inspiring because we're doing sister circles in Pakistan, and these young
Beautiful.
women are 16 to 18 and they're sharing, I'm so insecure about this and that, and they're sharing their stories real time on Saturday mornings. And this is not, I said to him, listen, I'm in my late 50s. I have these things too. In other words, it's a journey, but these are things, if
It's
you
a
can
journey.
figure out at your young age and get it right. So the fact that you went, now back to you, Kathalynn, the fact that you went on that journey and started figuring that out along as you're growing, and you became a mom and you continued your path and then became a psychologist, social worker, all the things you did to help people, is by knowing yourself and going inward and figuring those things out and unlocking that. And that's a story that women should hear, because it's like, holy cow, you went from, being on a stage to looking within. And I think, that's what I'd take away from it, which is just friggin' awesome, because it's very easy to stay out there and not go in here. You know what I mean?
Well, that was impossible for me. I could never be out there without going in. Now I couldn't be out there for long,
Mm.
The things that happened in LA, I don't know why. It was just some magical stuff, but also I was very devastated with Brian,
Mm.
but I have to say, and I've seen this, that I was so self-involved about me. Oh, he doesn't like me because maybe I'm not pretty enough. Maybe, I don't have that kind of body I should have. Maybe I'm blah, 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 too insecure. Maybe he saw that too much of a baby, blah, blah, blah. It was all about, oh, me, me, me. And I realized later, wait a minute, what about him? You had no idea what was really going on with him when you showed up in LA.
Mm.
And now I know.
Mm.
And now I'm going, oh man, it's a whole different thing. If you just get out of yourself and you take a look at the other person, wow,
It's beautiful.
didn't realize what was going on with him. And so all of this stuff that I had going on was so wrong. And then the listener today doesn't know the story, but there was a moment where his friend Dell, when I called, remember the Dell at
Yeah,
the airport,
yeah,
everybody?
yeah.
Where he clicked. Well, I met him and I had called for Brian another time and he tried to get me to come up and sleep with him. And I didn't, I was devastated. I was so devastated by him even asking, thinking that, well, he's Brian's best friend. And Brian probably said, just go ahead, take a shot for her. I'm not interested. I had that assumption. That was a reasonable assumption if they were friends, that he might have said to Brian, hey, you don't dig her. Let me see if I can get you.
Mhm.
Furthest thing from the truth. Furthest thing.
So it's the
They
stuff
had
we
never-
play in our heads.
So it's the stuff we play in our heads that this has to be about me. They had a talk. He gave him the go. Never did that happen. But of course, this is what I fed myself and believed it for a lot of years.
So yeah.
That's what we do, right? That's what we do.
It is. It's unfortunate. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's interesting. I mean, I think I've told you, I've been on a journey for 4 years now doing work, and I haven't gone through the methodology that you, or the process that you teach with letting go, but I use that phrase of letting go of just things and just literally almost cleaning my mind, just not letting the chaos in and keeping it clean and whole. And, I'm focusing on creating and being there for other people and being of service. And it's been a journey. And I'm curious, like, just as we close out on on your story, because I think your story is fascinating. As I said, I think what amazes me about it is when you began, the period of time you began and finding yourself along the journey.
You mean
to
to
who you are.
begin
In the 50s, like
what?
who you were
You
your
mean-
whole life. Like when I look at your age and where you are, I just feel you're so evolved. Your story is so interesting. I know many women your age and who've done different things with their life, and to go inward is just pretty spectacular.
I just
so-
I want to just address one thing before we end, is in the letting go. You know, a lot of the books, and they're great books. I began with things like this, books like that, but you can't control your thoughts because you don't know what thoughts are going to come in.
Mhm.
And when I was in India once, I asked this really evolved master, you know, where do these thoughts come from? He said, the thoughts just come. And, you know, the difference between, say, an enlightened person or a self-realized person is they don't attach to the thoughts.
Mm,
They just come and they go. They just watch the thoughts. They let them go.
mm,
They don't then have a story and then think about that negative thing forever and just bring it in and identify with that story or identify with anything. They just don't identify with it. But beyond that, we have to deal with the feelings, and every feeling wants something. And it either wants approval, control, security, safety, or it wants oneness or separation. And sometimes we just have to look and see what's making us miserable, what's making us unhappy. What want is it that we're wanting? And if we boil it down, God, I feel out of control today. If we just allow ourselves to let the wanting control leave, we're automatically in control. If we're wanting approval, even our own, where we're beating ourselves up, if we just allow ourselves to let go of wanting our own approval and just say, okay, I can give myself a little approval right now, all of a sudden we're much more centered.
mm,
The other thing is to remember that the feelings, there's an energy. It's just an energy. It's not real.
mm.
I can give you these glasses, but I can't give you a feeling. A feeling is only a feeling, and they come and they go. We're not the feeling and we're not the thoughts. So when we recognize that we,
You sound like Eckhart Tolle.
well, we can let them go
Yeah, yeah.
because we're not them.
Yes.
They don't have us. We're holding them. And as soon as we know that a feeling, and we allow that energy, sometimes locked in our chest or our stomach or our throats, feel the energy and just like smoke, just open up and allow it to leave. Then all of a sudden, the negative thoughts that were attached to all of those negative feelings, things that we have a charge on, automatically clear off.
Mm,
They automatically clear off. We don't have to do anything.
mm,
And so, you know, if we're just more aware of what we're feeling and allow that feeling to leave, I find that it's more helpful than just saying, oh, I had a negative thought. Damn, I can't have that thought. Let me just replace it with love, 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 love. It's not a mantra of that. You are automatically feeling love when you've let go of fear. When you've let go of anger, automatically you're feeling pretty good, pretty centered. So I find that doing that work really moved me along in my own life. And I must say that at 72 years old, I guess I'm 72 or 73, 72, I don't even know. The man that I love from 16 years old, we married. And I guess, you know, I said, I'm finally evolved enough to have my man. I both really something. But I do know that during COVID, I was able to really, everybody had so much time that there was no distractions. And I just started cleaning up my whole life in my first relationship of wanting to change anything that ever happened, to wanting to control it, to wanting everybody's approval. And then all of a sudden he shows up.
Isn't that interesting? The
I find
timing.
it.
I mean, it's here
Yeah.
you are at this chapter of your life.
We were
That's so
both-
beautiful.
we were
I
both
know.
right.
It's just so beautiful. And it's honestly, you guys are so adorable together. It's just wonderful to see. I feel like I could see you in your youth. So this next question, I think you're gonna love,
Okay.
which is what are your superpowers,
My
Kathalynn?
superpower is letting go. To me, there's only one superpower. What you let go of, you have.
Mm,
You know, stop
Mm.
wanting it. Just decide, damn it, I'm having it.
mm,
stop sitting around and daydreaming about something, have it.
Mm,
And then your actions will come after that decision. My superpower is deciding, a power in decision.
mm,
There's a superpower, and that's mine. I'm having it. And
I
then
love
all of
it.
a sudden, what happens is you know what to do. You
Mm,
know what to follow through with.
mm.
But that decision has got, my kids are trying to get me, every 3 daughters. I love my daughters. All 3 of them called to respond.
Well, that's good. I don't
My
know that we're
darling
gonna edit that out.
But I just want people to understand that confusion, just be in confusion for a minute, allow that feeling to be there, relax into that feeling and allow it to leave, because you know what you want.
Mm,
That within you knows what you want.
mm,
So get in touch with what you want. Make a decision to have it,
mm.
not to want it.
That's
People
interesting.
go all their lives, oh, I want that perfect relationship. Oh, I want all that money. Oh, I want that career. They want it and they dream about it. But hey, in order to have it, you've got to have a decision, and you've got to do what you have to do to have it. Sometimes it might be uncomfortable, but what do you want? Do you want that? Or do you want the wanting to control? Do you want to stay in the wanting approval? Do you want to stay in the fear, or would you rather have it?
Mm,
And it's very powerful. So when you say your superpower, it's in my decisions and it's in my letting go.
that's brilliant.
That's
That's
all.
brilliant. So how do you, I mean, so that's fantastic. Thank you for that. I think you're teaching us a lot in this podcast. I mean, how would you say you use these superpowers of letting go and your decision tree to help other women?
Well, I do have a private practice
Okay.
where I have women come to me, and I usually say, give me 10 sessions and I'll show you, we'll handle it. You'll be able to take this technique out yourself. So, I have done seminars, and my former husband and I did charities. We started Hedge Funds Care, which helps child abuse around the world and help empower these young girls. So whenever I can, I do it. Even if I'm having dinner with someone and they, what I call wanting to change that. One of the biggest things is, and I was saying something to one of my clients the other day, when you're wanting to change something, you're holding it in mind in order to change it. So if mind is creative, you're never letting it go. You're recreating something you don't want, and you're stuck. But when you let go of the feelings around it, of letting go, wanting to change it, you're not having Alzheimer's. Something happened, but without the charge. Then when you're where you're at, what Eckhart Tolle said, be here now. When you let go of wanting to change whatever it was in the past, you're able to be present. Because a lot of people feel the past will dictate what's going to happen in the future. Well, he always cheated, so I think he's going to keep doing it. Well, you've got the past, and maybe he will, maybe he won't, but you're not serving yourself or him or anyone else by holding that. And from there, you might be able to recreate someone in your life who doesn't cheat. I'm just
I
coming
think
out of my head
that's
right
an
here.
interesting that's an interesting example, and
Yeah.
I can totally relate.
Yeah.
Like just having gone through so much change in the past 4 years, just thinking about, I was never one to really get stuck in my past. I don't know if that's my wiring.
Oh, that's great.
I try and I've always
That's
tried to
great.
move forward.
It's
Being
wonderful.
here now, what I have learned in the past 4 years is don't be so consumed about what your future looks like, because when you
Right.
are there, you're not here now. And I think that, to your point of saying letting go of the need to know what tomorrow is going to look like, and being here right in this moment with you.
Sure. Letting go, but do you realize that people say, I'm a little afraid of the unknown? I said, but you're already in it.
Exactly.
You were going to be here 5 years ago, a year ago,
Of course. not.
or a month ago. You're already in the unknown. How is it? Is it so scary? No, of course not. Every moment we're in the unknown.
I like that.
Like a year ago, I think I'd be sitting here with Elizabeth doing it. This is the unknown, and
Exactly.
it's great. And you're taking care of life. I just want to say this: when you let go of wanting to control, you're not sure. You have goals in life. You have things, intentions that you want. We're not saying, don't do anything. Just sit around and say, oh, well, we're not saying that not to direct the mind and have some intentions, but you have to take care of what you're taking care of. When I went to Columbia, it was very hard. And I just thought, oh man, I'll never get through this. But I used to be driving and I used to have this, oh man, just to go on that stage at that school and get that diploma and everything. And I stopped myself and I went, that's great. But where you're now is you got a paper to do, go get to the library and get the research done, one paper at a time.
Mm.
And I walked that stage and I got that diploma. But I had to bring myself back one paper. What's the exam tomorrow? This is what you have to do. That'll take care of itself if you take care of this. And it was really, really so big for me to have that, that I really took everything I learned and put it right there. And I ended up having them. And for me, that was really a big deal for me. But again, letting go of the wanting to change, there's some very difficult things that happen to people. And it's bad enough they happen, but to relive it and to relive it. And it doesn't mean you're gonna forget it. And it doesn't mean that if you have to take caution around certain people or certain things, you do it. But that charge and that energy that pulls you and sucks you, that's what we want to let go.
Yeah, you want to stay in
That's
the
what we
good
wanna do.
frequency, the good energy versus,
Exactly.
oh, I live my life that I can so relate to what you're
Yeah.
saying, but actually not being in that toxic place. I was in a vortex of toxicity that I myself didn't create and got out of it. And what I will tell you is that, like, I wake up every day with a smile on my face. I feel so free.
Yeah.
And, I have let go of that stuff because it doesn't serve me now. And I think that's the biggest thing is what you're saying is if you're in that, it's not serving you. And so,
No, of course not.
yeah.
And we've got this life, we've got this life and it's beautiful. And we wanna make it the best we can. Listen, the next one, wherever we go, whatever happens, will take care of itself. But we're here. Why not enjoy it?
Mm.
And I say to women of every age, they go, well, it's over for me. I go, well, it's not. It's never over for you. Kidding me? I got married to the man that I've loved inside of me all my life. And I made that decision when I first started. I'm gonna marry him. I didn't know it would take 50 years or 60, whatever it was. I didn't think that long, but it happened.
I think that's just it puts a smile on my face when I see you guys. You're just clearly so connected. It's just wonderful. And he's a doll of a human being. This has been, a wonderful conversation. I so appreciate everything you've gone through and everything you're bringing out into the world. And just, I hope you feel celebrated. You're amazing.
Thank you
Another
so
woman
much.
making history. And thank you for joining me today.
Well, I love being here. I love the conversation. So thank you very much.
Oh, awesome. This is great. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Under the Sisterhood. If you haven't already, please give us a quick rating and review on Apple or Spotify. And make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn so you can hear from more amazing women. This podcast is created and hosted by Under the Sisterhood LLC and Elizabeth Elfenbein, produced by Elizabeth Elfenbein and Zach Slaff, and edited by Zach Slaff. The music is by Ayla Schaefer, her song, Rose.